in the house, all the men in the house, they're on that back table right there next to the sound booth. So as you leave today, pick one of those up. They're just little devotionals for the men. And whether you're a dad or not, it's for all the guys. So anyway, so Dan did that. And do I have a couple of gentlemen who would come up and do offering for us? I don't know where the other bag is.
I think they probably either got one back or Gene and Vine.
Oh, Gene and Vine.
They take the money. That's all right. I can do it.
Okay. Thanks. All right. So they've got the other bag. Kevin, would you say grace over the offering, please? I did not know that. It's good to know. All right. So Dan asked me a couple weeks ago if I would preach today. And so I said, sure. We're not having church tonight, by the way. He wants everybody to spend time with their families. If you've got a dad, spend time with them because those moments are precious. If you've got a husband, spend time with him because those moments are precious too. And if you got a husband you live with every day, sometimes it doesn't seem like those moments are so precious, but they really are. So anyway, just enjoy your family today. Hope everybody can go out and have a good time or stay in and have a good time, whatever that looks like for you guys. All right. So when Dan asked me to preach this message, I said, sure. And he looked at me and he said, well, you're going to preach a Father's Day message, right? And I said, sure. I'm not a father. I'm not a dad. So I don't really know how to preach a Father's Day message from that frame of reference because I'm not a dad. And so I have really been struggling with this message for 2 weeks. I knew 2 weeks ago he was going to ask me to do this, and I've just been struggling. And even last night, I went through 2 weeks, and I've got sermons saved up in my computer. I've got years worth of sermons, okay? And so I've been going through the computer, and I've been looking at all my files, and I see a title, and I think, oh, that might be the one. And I open it, and I start reading it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. And so last night, thought about it all day yesterday, and instead of working on a sermon, I was at the studio, and I was playing with quilt blocks. And the whole time I'm playing with quilt blocks, I'm thinking, well, what am I supposed to preach tomorrow? Tomorrow's coming quick. It's Saturday. I got to figure this out. And so all day long, I thought about it, and I sat down and picked out the music, and I thought that I was going to preach a message on that song, Nobody by Casting Crowns. And so that's why I put that song in there, and I thought, because I've got one started about nobody. And I thought, well, that's a good message, so I'll preach that. No, that wasn't right either. God changed my mind. And so last night I was sitting in the living room. Kevin's watching TV, and I got my earplugs in so I'm not distracted. And I sit down, and the thought came to me: what is God's expectation of a father? And I thought, now that's a good question. Because it can be not just expectations of fathers, it can be expectations of mothers, of brothers, of uncles, of aunts. It can be anybody. But the thought was specifically, what is God's expectation of fathers? And so I asked myself, well, what is a father? Google says, I always go to Google to find out what Google says. Google says a father is a male parent who has sired, adopted, or raised a child. Well, duh, that's obvious. So, there's a statement out there that says anybody can be a father, but it takes a special man to be a daddy, right? It takes a special man to be a dad. So Google's answer was not quite right. Culture says that manhood is defined by toughness, success, dominance, independence, and physical strength. All of those things are correct, but that could be for anybody, not just a father. I know many women who have toughness and success and independence and physical strength. So that could be for anybody, okay? The society that we live in often celebrates the loudest, toughest, and most aggressive examples of masculinity as what a man should be. The tough guy. Everybody knows the tough guy, right? But I thought, no, that doesn't really fit either. So the biblical manhood is this. Biblical manhood is defined by Christ-like character, not stereotypes or cultural traditions. Godly manhood is rooted in, not going to get through it without crying, courage, humility, integrity, compassion, self-control. That's what a godly man is. That's what a godly man exhibits. That's what a godly man lives. He lives that truth. And I'm not going to say that everyone gets it right all the time, because none of us do, right? But if we had to look at all of those definitions of manhood, what kind of man does the world need today? We need a godly man in our homes. We need a godly man in our lives, right? Ezekiel 22 gives us a little bit of insight, and it's a really long chapter, so we're not going to read the whole thing. But I want to hone in on something specific in Ezekiel 22. In this book, we see that Jerusalem had become a very violent city full of all sorts of wickedness. There was no longer any respect for holy things. There was no respect for the family. There was no respect for the needy. There was no respect for the elders. Sexual immorality was just thrown around like it was no big deal. Cheating, bribery, lying, thievery, all of these things just permeated the entire culture of Jerusalem. And in Ezekiel 22:30, this is what it says. I looked for someone. Let me read it on this one. So I sought for a man among them who would make a wall and stand in the gap before me on behalf of the land, that I should not destroy it, but I found no one. Now, for those of you who don't know, Ezekiel was a prophet, so this is God talking. So God searched all of Jerusalem for a man to build a wall and stand in the gap, and he found not a single one. So the metaphor of building a wall, in ancient times, back when this was written, a city wall provided defense for the city. Okay? If a section of that wall broke, then invaders could come in and destroy the city. And Ezekiel uses this image to illustrate a society crumbling under its own corruption. Jerusalem was crumbling under its own corruption. All of the things that were rampant in Jerusalem, not a single godly man could he find. Okay? Standing in the gap represents intercession. You've all heard about intercessory prayer, right? And we do it all the time when we do group prayer. We have people come in and say, I want to stand in the gap for whoever. And we lay hands on that person, and it's a point of contact. And so we stand in that gap and we represent that person. Okay? So God was looking for someone to rebuild the wall and stand in the gap. Someone intervening on behalf of the people to plead for mercy and turn away God's impending judgment. And he found not one, not a single one. The tragedy of the chapter is it details widespread corruption among Israel's leaders and citizens. So it wasn't just the people, it was the leaders too. As an entirety, the whole of Jerusalem was completely corrupted. God wanted to spare the nation, but he couldn't find a single person willing to stand up for the truth and intercede for the people. Now, I don't know about you, but does this remind you of anything in recent history? Like, this is the world we live in today. This is where we live today. And it's not just our country, it's all over the world. If you watch the international news, you see it happening everywhere. If you're paying attention, it's happening everywhere. And what is clearly obvious is that there is a very present shortage of people today who will stand up for Christ. There's a shortage of people who will stand in the gap, who will build the wall and stand in the gap and say, look, God, I'm going to stand in the gap for these people who are lost and don't know any better, and they've thrown away your word and they've thrown away your love. I'm going to stand in the gap for them. Now, I know that people in this church are standing in the gap. I know that people in this church are praying for their community. They're praying for the others in the church. I know that that's true. God knows that too. But by and large, as a society, we are the minority. We are outnumbered by thousands, millions. We are outnumbered. If you look out in the world and you see it for what it really is, we are so far outnumbered that if you really think about that and you focus on that, that can be scary, right? But I'm going to tell you who matters most. In our corner of the world, the ones who are most important, we can't control what's happening anywhere else in the world, but we can control what's happening in our own little corner. We can control what's happening within our household and with our family, within our own families. We can control most of the time. Tanya says, well, sometimes. We have the opportunity to control what we're thinking, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing. If you're raising children, you have the opportunity to control what they see and what they listen to and what they're watching on television and who their friends are. And no, you can't go to school and control it at school, but you can control who they hang out with at home. You have, as a parent, you have the opportunity to control that. And by and large, the most important person, historically speaking, in a household is the fathers. A godly man standing up for his family and saying, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That is so important. But if you're a single mom, and I was a single mom for a while, if you're a single mom and you don't have that, you are just as important as that dad. Because you're mom and dad. You have to be both. So it's even more important that you're standing and you're saying, okay, as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. And you do it to the best of your ability, right? Godly fathers and godly mothers are so important, and it can never be underestimated. In Psalms chapter 112, verses 1 and 2, it says, praise the Lord. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who delights greatly in his commandments. His descendants will be mighty on the earth. The generation of the upright will be blessed. So this is what my version of the Bible says. I have the modern English version. It says, praise the Lord. Blessed is the man who fears the Lord, who greatly delights in his commandments. His offspring will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. So again, that goes for fathers and mothers. Or if you're a grandmother raising your grandchildren, it goes for you. If you're a grandfather raising your grandchildren, it goes for you. Anybody who has the responsibility of raising a child, this is for you. It's not just dads today. It's Father's Day, but it's not just about that, okay? Christian fathers hold a profound spiritual responsibility because they are the primary lens through which children often view God, okay? By modeling Christ-like love, servant leadership, and steadfast faith, they become the anchor for the family and very often determine the spiritual trajectory of the future generations. I had my grandpa Ernie. Katerina remembers this. We had Grandpa Ernie, my mom's stepfather. Mom's dad left when she was about 3 or 4 years old. And then Grandma married Grandpa Ernie many years later. And if there is a picture of a godly man, it was my Grandpa Ernie. He was so amazing in every way that you could display the evidence of God in a human. It was in Grandpa. I vividly remember, and Katerina doesn't remember this because I don't think he was still in the choir at this time, but when I was very little, I mean little, I grew up in 3 churches. So my mom's parents, Grandpa Ernie and Grandma Pat, went to V7 Pres, Village 7 Presbyterian Church. So I went to the Presbyterian Church very often. My father was Catholic. So then I would go to the Catholic church with my dad, okay? But then we moved to Toma Place, this is in Colorado Springs, where I met Kevin's older brother, Ron, and they started taking Radiant Assembly of God Church. So I grew up in 3 different denominations as a child. I personally think that's kind of awesome because I got to see how it works in all these different denominations. And you know what I learned? Everybody's got some of it right and everybody's got some of it wrong. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you have a relationship with Christ. That's what I learned growing up in 3 different churches, okay? But, and you also have to know, I'm a choir nerd. If you don't know what that means, I totally nerd out when I see a choir, like I'll be flipping through YouTube and I see a choir come on. And it can be a little kids choir. It can be the Mormon choir. It can be, I don't care what choir it is. I will stop and listen. And I will sing along. And I just love it because I'm a choir nerd. I started singing in school choir when I was 5 years old. I sang in choir all the way through school. When I was 15, I got saved at a Nicky Cruz conference. And I joined the Radiant Assemblies of God Church Choir, and I sang in that choir until we moved to Nucla 20 years ago. And there is something about a choir that just gets me excited. All these voices singing together, and you can have one of you that's not very good. And it doesn't matter because all of them together are beautiful, right? So there's something about a choir that just gets me excited. And I think it might have something to do with my grandfather, Ernie. Grandpa Ernie was in the choir at V7 Pres. And I can remember I'd stay Saturday nights. And I would go to church with them on Sundays. And Grandma would always make sure I was dressed in my Sunday best. And she was. And Grandpa was dressed in a suit and tie, clean shaven. Well, he always had a little bit of a beard, but it was all trimmed nicely. And his hair was always perfect. And I remember going to church with Grandma and Grandpa. And this was, from little tiny on. And I would walk into the choir room with Grandpa. And all the choir people are in there. And there's a closet that has the robes. And each robe has a name on it. And they were getting their robes. And they were putting their robes on. And they're all singing. And they're getting ready to sing, right? And I just remember watching this happen and just going, wow, I want to do that. And I was so excited about it. And I remember then Grandpa would shoo me out And I would go find Grandma, and I would sit in the sanctuary with Grandma, and they would walk in, they would come in on both sides, and they would fill up the choir loft. And there's Grandpa standing in the bass section. And I promise you I could hear him by himself in the choir. I knew that I could because I knew his voice, because he sang to me at home. I heard Grandpa singing hymns, and I heard him singing hymns all the time. He was always singing. You know how Miss Bobby, Sister Bobby's always singing something? Grandpa was always singing and whistling. He whistled a lot too, right? And so I got to see this. And when they would go up and they'd be singing in the choir loft, I would be so excited. And then Grandma would sing along. We'd all be singing along. And to me, that is a core memory. It's something that I will never, Katarina's crying because she does remember. It's a core memory for me, and it's something that I have always very fondly remembered. It's something that we shared together. When the last time Grandpa came to visit, I sang a special. They were here for Sunday, and I sang a special at church that Sunday. And we got done, and he came up to me and he gave me a hug, and he said, I love that you're still singing for Jesus. And it just made him so happy that I was still singing for Jesus. But that's something that he instilled in me when I was a little tiny girl. I was lucky enough to have two grandfathers who were singers. My dad's dad sang Frank Sinatra type stuff, which is also amazing music. But Grandpa Ernie taught me about Jesus music. And that cemented into my heart. But not only did I get to see Grandpa be this amazing man of God in church, I got to see him walk this out every day of his life. I never saw him angry. Not one time. In my whole life did I ever see Grandpa angry. I never saw him raise his voice. I never saw him lose his temper or lose control. Never one time did I see it. Not saying that he was not a disciplinarian, because he was. And if we did something wrong, he would very kindly and very lovingly correct us with a godly correction and a godly love. Now, Grandma, on the other hand, she had a wooden spoon. Yes? She had the wooden spoon. And when Grandma pulled the wooden spoon out, boy, you knew it. My Aunt Gloria, their youngest, is only 3 years older than I am, and we grew up more like sisters because we're only 3 years apart. And I remember one time Gloria had done something wrong, and Grandma got upset with her and he spanked her. And I don't have any idea what Gloria did. So Grandma, of course, gets out the wooden spoon and she whops her on the behind, and Gloria goes to Grandpa, Daddy, Mama spanked me. And Grandpa got very indignant because Grandma spanked his little girl. He was so upset. But he also knew that she needed correction. And so when it came to spankings, that was Grandma's job. And she was pretty darn good at it. But but Grandpa was this great example of this godly love. But not only was he that way with us, I got to see him be a godly husband. I got to see a living example of what a true man of God is, how they treat their wife, how they love their wife, how they go alongside her. They're not in front of her. They're not more important of her. They're not behind her because she's not the boss. But I saw my grandparents live this life that they were equal and they were strong together. And they held together. There was something about Grandma and Grandpa. It didn't matter what happened. Nothing was going to separate them. Nothing was going to pull them apart. And at the time when I was a kid, I didn't get it. I didn't understand what that was. I knew that I wanted it, but I had no idea what it was that I wanted. I had no idea what he was showing me when he showed me. He showed me how men were supposed to treat women and children. And he lived a godly life in front of me. And I was watching. Here's what I want to say for everybody in the room. You have young people in your life that are watching what you do. And what you do is important because they're not listening to what you say. They're watching what you do. And it may not be your child. It may be a niece or a nephew. It may be a neighbor's child. It may be a kid you're bringing to church with you. It may be anybody's kid. But they're watching and they're learning. And you can say, I love you and I care about you. But if your actions are harmful and hurtful, what you say means nothing. But if you say, I love you and I care about you, and your actions actually show and prove that you love and care about them, they're not going to remember your words. That one conversation I had with Grandpa after the last time he was here in Nukla visiting, that's the last conversation I remember. Oh no, there's another conversation I remember. Whole nother story. But I don't remember Grandpa's words. I remember Grandpa's actions, and I remember the way he treated me, the way he treated Grandma, the way he treated all of us. That's what's important. He lived his life for Christ, and it made a permanent impression on me. And he made me want to find a man that was just as good as he was. It took me 3 tries, but I finally found him. Most of you know that I was married twice before Kevin and I got married. He was married twice before we got married. And when we got together, we had just decided, okay, that's it. If I never get married again, it's too soon because it's just horrible and it sucks and I just don't want to play that game. Now, Kevin and I met when I was 15, he was 25. And we knew then that we were right for each other. But I was so jailbait, it was never going to happen. So he joined the Navy, traveled the world, got married, did his thing. I did my thing. 10 years later, we found each other again, both single. And we had both decided that this was it, we're done. We're not gonna have a relationship with anybody because I'm over it. At this point, I was totally over it, and he was over it. But God had another plan. God brought us together. Kevin is my rock. He's my anchor. And he's my hero in so many ways. Yes, he's a Navy man, and that's huge for me. But what Kevin is for me is he's a godly man. He's the husband to me that my grandpa was to my grandmother. He's the father to my kids that my grandpa was to us. In so many ways, I watch Kevin, and he struggles so much. Most of you know his health history. 100 surgeries in 30 years, in and out of the hospital, excessive amounts of pain every day. He has more pain in one day than most of us will live within a lifetime. But he carries it all with such grace. And through it all, never once has he cursed God. Never once has he questioned why. And people ask him all the time, how do you do this? How do you do what you do? How do you live this life? And his answer is, nobody gave me a choice. So I do it to the best of my ability with God as my rock and my anchor. And I get to see this lived out every day. Every morning, I get up before he does. And I'm out in the living room, and I'm doing my Bible study and reading my coffee. And pretty soon, we've got a little Bose speaker. And pretty soon, that Bose speaker goes on. And it's loud enough, you can hear it all the way through the house. We live in a little small house, 850 square feet. And you can hear this through the entire house. And he's praising God. He wakes up in the morning worshiping Jesus. And he spends 30 minutes to an hour every morning in worship and prayer. He gets himself prayed up for the day, reading his Bible. I can't tell you the times that he lays awake at night praying for whatever needs prayer for. He has insomnia, but he doesn't let it go to waste. He uses that time to speak to God on others' behalf. He stands in the gap. And I am so thankful that I have a living example of my Grandpa Ernie with me. And I'm so thankful for that. He is a walking example of Christ-like character, compassion, courage, humility, integrity, and self-control. Kevin has so much self-control. You know what it is like raising teenagers if you raise teenagers, right? Wow, that is I didn't realize how frustrated God might get with us until I had teenagers. And oh, for the love of God. Teenagers will test you in every way that a person can possibly be tested. And there were moments, well, toddlers too, but it's a whole different thing. I'm looking at Amy going, okay, toddlers are their own thing. People think, oh, they'll get past the toddler phase and it'll be better. It'll be so much better when they're teenagers. And I'm like, oh, God bless you. Because it is a struggle. It is hard to be raising these teenagers out here. Oh, yeah, 4 of them. We had 4 too. Yeah, we had 4 too. But I remember the kids, we had rules in our house. And when we got married, we sat down, and about every 6 months, we would sit down and we would go over the house rules. And the number one rule in the house was be nice. And everything else kind of fell underneath be nice. Don't push your brother in the street. Don't hit your sister with a baseball bat. Don't, everything kind of fell under be nice. And so we would, with the kids, go over the house rules. And so the kids would help us make up the rules, what was not allowed to do in the house, okay? And for everything that they were not supposed to do, there was a consequence. And the kids helped us create these consequences. The beautiful thing behind this method is that you don't have to punish them because they just naturally punish themselves because they know what the rules are, and the rules never change. And the consequences are just what they are, to the point. There was one time, so Kagan and Bethany were 20 months apart. And I don't ever suggest having children that close together. I thought, oh, they'll play together. It'll be so lovely. Oh, no. No. It's oil and water, fight like cats and dogs. It was awful, okay? Now, Katerina was how much older than Beth? Like 7 years, right? Yeah, so Katerina's 7 years older than Bethany, but Bethany and Katerina had to share a room. Well, that was no good either. Oh, so, kids are just going to fight. It's just the nature of being kids because, like I've said before, we're born with a sinful nature, right? And kids are just mean. Like, they just are. So there was this one night. I called dinner, and one of the consequences for misbehavior was what we called lockdown, which means you're grounded to your room. You can come out of your room to go to the bathroom and shower, but when it's time to eat, I will bring you your food. You eat in your room, you do everything in your room for whatever the set amount of time is. Usually, to get out of lockdown, you had to write a paragraph about why what you did was wrong, or Bible verses, or whatever. And as soon as that was done, you could get out of your room, okay? So this one night, it's time for dinner, so I holler for all the kids, and Kagan doesn't show up. So I go to his room, and I said, honey, it's time for dinner. And he goes, oh, I'm in lockdown. And I was like, okay. So I go out to the kitchen, and I ask Kevin, why did you put Kagan in lockdown? He goes, well, I put him in lockdown. And I was like, okay. So I called Kevin out. I called Kagan out, and I said, honey, neither one of us put you in lockdown. And he goes, well, I hit Bethany, and I knew you were going to anyway, so I just did it. They punished themselves. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And so I was like, dude, high five, awesome job. You punished yourself. I appreciate the acknowledgement. You don't have to be in lockdown tonight because that's a really big thing. And so it was awesome. But there were the moments that was not so successful. And they would make Kevin boiling mad. But he never one time raised his voice. Now I did. Oh, I was the yeller in the house. I was the one who yelling and angry and, Kevin never once raised his voice, never lost his temper, never cussed at him, nothing. Kevin was just this calm, flat lake of nothingness. And it used to drive me bananas because Solomon would mess up and he'd go sit on the back porch with Solomon and they'd just sit there and have a conversation. And they're laughing and they're chit-chatting and I'm in the house just fuming because, Solomon did something wrong. And he would come in the house and I'm like, why did you not yell at him? Why did you not scream at him? I don't understand. And Kevin's answer to me was, I can yell at him until he's blue in the face and he's never going to hear it. But I can have a conversation with him and I can set an example. And that is what's going to make the difference. And I didn't get it. It took me a long time to get it. I'm a little thick-headed if you all haven't figured it out. Mom's laughing out loud. So I'm just a little bit thick-headed. Little bit. But so when I say Kevin is a walking example of godly love and self-control and peace and kindness and gentleness and all of those beautiful fruits of the Spirit and patience, he's got the patience of a saint. He's married to me. So he has to have the patience of a saint because I am not the easiest person to live with. Mom says, oh, they recorded that. So anyway, I'm so thankful that I have Kevin as a living example of what Christ-like character is like. And here's the thing. God is still looking for men like Kevin. He's looking for women like Kevin. He's looking for teenagers that are willing to build a wall and stand in the gap for their dad. Okay? He's looking for children who are willing to stand in the gap for their parents who are struggling. He's looking for aunts and uncles who see that their nieces and nephews are struggling wherever they are, in whichever situation they're in, and they're going to stand up and they're going to build that wall and they're going to stand in the gap and they're going to stand in for their nieces and nephews, right? God is looking for all of us to be that person for whoever it is in your life that needs someone to stand in the gap. And when we do that, miracles happen. Unfortunately, they may not happen in our lifetimes. We can spend all of our lives praying for someone that we love to get saved, and we may never see it happen. But we planted the seed, and we stand in the gap, and we pray for them regularly. And the Bible tells us that his word does not come back void, right? Every time you stand in the gap and you pray for that someone that God has laid on your heart, maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe it's you're a teacher and it's kids that you teach. It's kids that are in the school that you work in. Whenever you stand in the gap and you pray and you say, God, I'm going to stand in for this person, you are the point of contact for God to reach out and touch that person. And you don't have to be in the same space with that person. They could be all the way on the other side of the world. God doesn't have limits, right? God can go anywhere. God can do anything because he's God, right? And so if we stand in that gap and if we do what God has asked us to do, if you're a father, a mother, anybody who's willing to stand in the gap, you matter. You are important. And don't ever doubt or question your ability to go to God and stand in the gap for anybody. Because in Titus 2, we can find exactly what God is looking for. So in Titus 2, verses 7 and 8, I think I put that one in there. Maybe. In all things, showing yourself to be a pattern of good works. In doctrine, showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you. So that's the New King James. I want to read it to you out of the Modern English, okay? It says, in all things, presenting yourself as an example of good works, in doctrine, showing integrity, gravity, incorruptibility, and sound speech that cannot be condemned, so that the one who opposes you may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you. That's what God is asking us to do. He is asking us to be that person of integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, and sound speech that cannot be condemned. If we are that person and we are living that life, don't get me wrong, none of us get it perfect all the time. Monday and Tuesday this last week was really bad. My sheriff showed up. And if you weren't here for the sermon where I talked about, when Jesus found Simon, he was Simon. Okay? But then he changed his name to Peter. And Peter became a piece of the rock, right? Well, after Jesus changed his name, there were still some times that Jesus would call him Simon because his Simon was showing. He reverted back to the way that he was before Jesus got a hold of him because he was having a bad day. Well, remember I said Kevin's married to me, so he has to have the patience of a saint. And I very much take after my mother in some ways, and my mother is fairly short-tempered and let's just say that when mom's not happy, there's nobody on the planet that's happy, okay? And so sometimes my Shara shows up, and Kevin will say to me, okay, Shara, oh, and don't you think that burns me and makes me so mad? But I also know that it's totally true. And I have to step back and say, oh, okay, you're right. And I'm sorry. And I have to apologize. And that's hard. That's really hard. Simon showed up even after Peter was Peter. Jeff and Tanya, I was on the ambulance for a long time. And Tanya's grandma, Esther, as I understand it, I never knew her, but the story goes, she was not the nicest person on the planet. And she had a short temper and whatever. And there were times Tanya'd get all up in a huff, and Jeff would say, your Esther is showing. And I knew what that meant. And Tanya immediately, it would just burn her bacon. But she knew he was right. And so we're not going to get it right every time. We're not always going to be that person that every second of the day is walking in integrity and walking in that Christ-like love, because we're human. And at the end of the day, we're all going to fail. We're all going to mess up. We're all going to have bad days. Monday, Tuesday was really bad days for me. But I woke up on Wednesday and I said, seriously, this is stupid. What am I doing? I'm making everybody in the house miserable, and it's just stupid. I need to pick up my big girl panties and put on my big girl boots and just go after it and get it done. And so that's what I did. But if you can just live your life, and remember I said it's not about what you say, it's about what you do in front of them. If you can put on your big girl or big boy boots, and you can straighten up your armor and straighten up your crown, and you can walk it out, you're going to be a living example for whoever it is that God has placed in your life to be an example for. You can be my Grandpa Ernie. You can be my Kevin. You can be that mom whose kid, when they grow up, says, my mom took me to church, but she didn't just take me to church. She loved me, and she loved me for real. It wasn't a fake, it wasn't a put on, it wasn't an act. I remember when Kevin and I first got married, and we were living in Colorado Springs, and Solomon lived with his mom in Pennsylvania, and he would come every summer and stay the summer. Well, at first, Solomon thought that the family he saw in the summertime was a fake family. He didn't believe that the love that was in our house was real. He thought it was a show. And he could not comprehend that the love that he was experiencing when he was at home with us was actually the love of God. Okay? So there was one day, kids were horsing around. I think Kevin was horsing around with the kids. And I had this little waterfall. I had a waterfall thing sitting on a cabinet, counter, whatever. And they were messing around, and Solomon bumped into it, and he knocked it off, and it fell on the floor, and it broke. And immediately Solomon got very upset, and he thought I was going to be angry because he broke my waterfall. And Kevin looked at me, and I looked at Kevin, and I looked at Solomon, and I said, oh, honey, it's okay. It's just a thing. And you should have seen the look of shock on this boy's face. He was like, you're not mad at me? And I said, it's just a thing. We don't cry over spilled milk in our house. It's just milk. It's not worth getting upset over. Things break. Things are things. Your heart is something so much more special. And I don't want to crush your heart because you broke a thing, because the thing can be replaced. Your heart can't. Solomon saw the love. He saw the love. And for years, I truly believed that Solomon hated me. He was 13 when he finally came to live with us permanently. And as I said, teenagers are rough. They are hard. And he was a very broken teenager. Things were happening in Pennsylvania that we didn't know about because he wasn't talking about it. He was a very, very broken teenage boy. And it was rough. And I truly believe that he hated me. And years later, he was married. And him and his wife came to Nucla to visit. And his wife and I were sitting and we were chatting about Solomon. And she said, you know that he loves you. And I said, okay. And she held my hand and she said, no. He has a mother and he has a mom and your mom. He loves you. And I found out then that all of those years that I thought he hated me, he didn't hate me. He was angry at his mother for doing all the things that had happened before he ever came to live with us. But he couldn't be angry at his mother. He couldn't hate her. So he took it out on me because I was the one that was there. And I was the safe one for him to take it out on. But see, that love showed him the real Christ-like love. And it made all the difference in the world for that boy, who now is an adult and actually has a healthy relationship with his mother. They were able to make peace and they were able to make things right. But I'm not sure if that Christ-like love had not been in our house. And it wasn't something that we practiced. It wasn't something that we would put on in the morning. It just was how we lived lives. It is how the house was. And I don't think that if we had had that love in our house, that boy would be in the place he is now as a young man, able to reconcile with his mom and have a relationship with her. And so what I'm saying to you is I have personal experience with what it means to live that out in front of somebody who desperately needs it. And if you do that, if you are that person of integrity, and you are that person who genuinely lives it out in front of people, God's going to honor that and it will not come back void. And you're going to be able to touch so many people and you will have no idea the magnitude of people that you can touch just by living it day in and day out. You're going to touch so many people. And they won't know what you have and they don't know why they want it, but they want it. And so I encourage everybody today to just be faithful, be obedient, try to live that Christ-like love day in and day out. And if you're having a bad day, it's okay. We all have them. But you go back to God and you say, God, I'm sorry. I need to start over. And if you were mean to somebody or nasty to somebody, apologize, ask forgiveness. And if they don't forgive, that's on them, not you. You go on and live your life. And you do your thing. And I promise you at the end of the day when you do that, number one, you're going to reach other people and you're going to make a difference in their lives, but you're going to have peace. You are going to have this peace inside of you, that peace of God that passes all understanding that nobody else can explain. Your whole world is falling apart around you, but you have this inner peace inside of you that just keeps everything calm and cool, right? If you're living the life the way you're supposed to, that's what you're going to get. And so this isn't just for everybody else that you're around. This is for you too. And it's going to make a huge difference in your life. It's going to make a huge impact in your life. And you're going to find you're still going to have problems. You're still going to run over rabbits the size of kangaroos and break your car. Like, things are going to happen. But you're going to be able to go through it knowing that you're not going through it by yourself. God's got your back. And it's going to be okay. No matter what the outcome is. It's going to be okay. Because God's word never comes back void. And actions you do in God's name never come back void. Not ever. So, that's my challenge to you. Live it. Just live it. Ask every morning, ask God, make me a vessel for you today. Whatever it is you would have me do, Lord, make me a vessel and help me to be obedient to it. And if you live your life that way, it is going to be so much better for you and everybody else. So, all right. All right. Are we all ready for the blessing? All right. Mind's clear, heart's clear? All right. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now may the God of peace make you holy in every way, and may your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless until our Lord Jesus Christ comes again. Amen. Thanks, y'all. I hope you have a great